Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel Kids Code. Today we have a special video for those who have never written a single line of code before. So we are going to start with Python, which is a beginner-friendly programming language that's both powerful and versatile. And also Python is a high-level programming language known for its readability and simplicity. So it's one of the best languages to get started to code. It's widely used in various fields from web development to data analysis and artificial intelligence. To get started, all you need to have is a computer or even a tab or a mobile device. You do not need to even install any software. We can just start with an online editor to get started, and later on we can download a software. All right, so let's get started. So the first step, what we're gonna do is we're gonna use an online compiler. So you can just go to Google and search for online compiler. Okay. If you search it, you'll see plenty of examples available. So I'll just choose the first one, which is GDB, onlinegdb.com. So I'll just pick this one. Once you pick this one, you can see the language here is C. So you have to change the language to Python 3 because that's the latest version of Python. And what you can do is you can just delete everything because you're going to start from scratch. So all the things are deleted. I'm going to zoom in so that it looks better. All right, so let's get started. So this is all we need to get started. So your first Python script. Okay, the first Python script will be a print statement, and this is used to show a message on the screen. Okay, so if you want to display something using code, we use this print statement. So let's see how this works. So all you have to do is just write print. Okay, and then you need to provide a parenthesis, and you also need to have a pair of quotation marks. You can use single quotation mark or double quotation marks. It's up to you. And here I can say something like, okay, hello world. This is like a classic example to get started to code in any programming language. So print a statement, parentheses, quotation marks are needed. So what will happen is this text that you have just written, hello world, it will be displayed on the screen. When I say displayed on the screen, you will notice at the bottom, there is something called input. And this is where you're gonna see the result when you click on run. So you will see the run button. If I click on run, you will see it's gonna say hello world. It'll give you some other information, but you can just ignore this. Just make sure that the exit code is 0. So that's how we can get started in Python. Okay, so again, the print function is used and you can pass a text. Now, another thing you need to know is this text is called a string. Okay, so whatever text you're passing here, this is called a string. In any programming languages, we use the term string. And as I said, the string must be in a quotation marks. Another thing we want to know is comments. Comments are made using hashtag because Python do not read English. So what I mean by this is, let's say I want to add a simple text. For example, I can say, I am learning Python. However, if you click on run, this will give you an error because Python doesn't understand English language. So what you have to do is if you want to write any notes, description, annotations, just use a hashtag. So Python will ignore this line. So only code you have is this print statement. This is just a comment saying that you are learning Python. So if you click on run, the error will be gone and you will still see the same message, hello world. Okay, so that's how we can get started with the print statement. That's our first Python script. Hopefully that makes sense. Let's go to our next topics to learn a little bit more about Python. So the next topic that we have is variables and data types. This is very important. Doesn't matter what language you're going to learn. You need to know what are variables and what are data types. So variables, you can think of like a container to store and manage data. Okay, so what I mean by this. So let's annotate. So when you want to store something using a programming language of your choice, you have to use this kind of containers. You can think of these containers, okay? And what we usually do is we usually assign a name for this container, okay? So this could be, for example, let's say I want to store something in this container, and the store name is, let's call this name, because I'm going to store a name here, okay? And then I have another one, I can say this, let's say age. Okay, so I want to store a name in this container, and then I want to store my age in another container. So these containers are basically called the variables, okay? So variables, a container to store and manage data. So let's look at an example. So let's go to our compiler and let's start creating a variable. So again, let me write the definition. So a variable is like a container which is used to store a value. Okay, so you can think of this. Now the variable name, let's call this name. Okay, so what we want to save here, let's call this Python new. So this is a name that I want to store. Be careful that if you are saving a name, it must be in a quotation mark, because again, this is a string. If you want to save a string, you must use the quotation mark. Doesn't matter if you're using that in the print statement or saving it in a variable, you must use the quotation mark. Okay, so that's how we can create a variable. Now, how do we see what do we have in that variable called name? So we can use the print function to display it. Okay, so again, I can use the print function to see, okay, what is the value saved in the variable called name? So what I can do, I can simply say print name. So this will show you what do you have in that variable called name. Now be careful that you do not need to use quotation mark when you are printing a variable, because you already have a variable with the value already in a quotation mark. So you don't want to use another quotation marks. If you do, that means Python will just print the actual text name. Okay, so I'll put a text here. So do not use quotation marks when printing a variable. So do not use it. Just is the name of the variable, and make sure you have uppercase, lowercase written correctly, because that will give you another error if you don't use it correctly. So if I click on run, I should see it will print Python newbie. If I want, I can also add a string before printing the variable. For example, I'm going to say hello. Now, since hello is a string and not a variable, you have to put it in a quotation mark. And also you have to separate the string and the variable using a comma. Okay, because you can't just put them side by side, because there need a separator is needed. So that's how it works. Now if I print this, it will just show you hello Python newbie. I also want to add a comma, so I can do this here so that it adds a comma. And let's say I'm going to also add an exclamation at the end. So you can see I need two commas because you have a string here, and then you have a variable here, and then you have another string, which is an exclamation mark. So if I click on run, this will show you this correctly. Hello, Python newbie. Okay, so this process is called concatenation, which is just combining strings and variables together. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Though the plus operator, we can also use a plus instead of comma. So both can be used, but there are some rules which we'll discuss later, when to use plus, when to use comma. Okay, so you can use comma or plus to combine your strings. Okay. All right, so that's about variables and data types. The data type that we're using here is a string. So name variable is a string. The last thing that we want to discuss is the user input. Let me delete this text first. Cool. So let's make our script interactive. So how do we communicate with another person? So what we're going to do is we will ask the user for their name and greet them personally. Okay, so let's say if you sign up for an account, online, bank, or social media, they will greet you, right? Let me say, okay, good afternoon, sir, or something, right? So you want to see how that works. So we will do this in 3 steps. So let's do this. So step number 1, ask a question using the print function. So what we will do a print statement. So I will say step number 1, ask a question. So what question you want to ask? So I'm going to simply say print. What's your name? So if I run this, this will display what's your name after it's done printing all this. So if I click on run, you will see it saying what's your name, but we cannot read the name yet because you have to use another function called input function. So just like the way that you have the print function, which displays something on the screen, the input function allows you to read something from the screen. Okay, so let's see how that works. So step 2, read the name and store it in a variable. So we want to read it, but we also want to store it in a variable. So let's call this variable a user name. Now notice that I used an underscore because I can't have this. I cannot have a space between the variable words. Okay, so it should be a single word, which is why I have to use the underscore. So all I have to do is just write the input function. That's it. So what this does is this will read whatever you type and save it in the variable called username. Okay, so we're done with step 2, and then we need one more step to actually see the name. Okay, so step 3 is what we can do is you can just use print. And I can say, okay, welcome. And this time I will use a plus, and I need to have a space. I'll add a space here. Welcome user name. Plus, I will use another exclamation mark here. So let's see what happens here. So you can see it's asking what's your name. So I'm going to type my name. Now your name will not be read if you don't press the enter key. So in order for the input function to work, you have to press the enter key once you're done writing your name. So press the enter key and you will see it says welcome Farouk. Okay, so that's done by the step number 3, welcome username plus exclamation. Another thing, notice that when you use plus, there is no space, but when you use comma, a space has been added automatically. So just keep that in mind. When you use a comma, you don't have to add a space. It automatically adds a space, but plus will not add a space. You have to manually add a space. Okay, so that's the introduction of Python. You just learned how input function works, how the print function works. So hopefully that makes sense. And in the next video, we will learn some other stuff. Thank you for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.